I am so excited for you to tune into today's episode. This is a interview with Coach Isabella. I have had the pleasure of knowing Isabella for over 5 years at this point, and I have seen her grow and change and heal. And now she is one of our incredible coaches inside of the Empowered Secure Love community. So you will hear me interview her, and she's going to share her story. We ended up getting so deep and there was so much to share that I wanted to turn this into a two-part episode. So part one is airing today, which you will hear, and then part two is coming on Friday. So I know you're going to love connecting with Isabella and hearing her story. And I do want to plant the seed that if you relate to her journey, if you are realizing, wow, it is time for you to do your own work, you don't have to do the work alone. So many of us are programmed to not ask for help. We're programmed to just try to push through and keep going and keep trying. And, oh, if you just keep dating, you'll find your person. But I want to let you know that you are so worthy of support. You're so worthy of the work and the healing so that you can become that securely attached version of you and start enjoying your dating life. Start getting different outcomes where you're actually attracting people who are emotionally available, who are able to have a healthy, loving partnership that lasts. You're so deserving of all that energy that you're putting into relationships actually going somewhere, actually taking you closer to that relationship you've always wanted. So if you feel called, this is the perfect time. Go apply to the Empowered, Secure, Loved program. The link is in the show notes. It takes less than 5 minutes. And I know that your future self is going to be so thankful that you did the work on you. All right, enjoy today's episode. You're going to love Isabella. And of course, as always, I'm wishing you high self-worth and great relationships. Welcome to the Let's Get Vulnerable podcast. We have a very special guest with us today. We have Coach Isabella from my team. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Morgan. I know we have talked about this, and I'm so excited to be here and just share my story with your community. I am a coach within the E.S.L program. I have been coaching for almost 5 years now, alongside many other self-development programs within the online coaching industry. I am the eldest daughter of four, raised in a European Canadian household. I have been navigating many different types of relationships since I was 13 years old. I had a long distance relationship almost all throughout high school for 5 years, and he lived in Australia. I lived in Canada, and just many different types of relationships. The college, love, the, dysfunctional relationship. And I have struggled with mostly avoidant and disorganized attachment styles until I dove into my healing journey a year later when I met Dr. Morgan in 2021. So
Yes.
yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, you have so much experience and you just have this energy of being an old soul. I'm sure you hear this all the time of just the wisdom and the depth of experience that you've had. I know it's just so valuable for our listeners to hear your journey and your story of becoming the securely attached Isabella. And it is kind of unique that I met you early on in your healing journey in 2021, and you were part of our team for a period of time, and that was wonderful. But even like from then to now, I can totally see the ways that you have changed and grown and done all of this work on yourself. So I just feel really lucky that I've been able to see your journey in real time and kind of get to know Isabella at the start of her healing journey and then where you are now. It's just amazing to see the growth that you've done. So I'm excited to just learn more about your story and have you share with the audience. And I think if you are open to it, you want to go back to maybe some of your early experiences and where some of those roots of the attachment style pieces started forming for you?
Yes, I love that. I would say when we look at, attachment style, we have to start with childhood. And within my childhood, coming from a European background, and being also the eldest daughter, I think birth order is extremely important. I took on a lot of responsibility at a very young age. And I would say the first 8 years of my life, my relationship with my parents was wonderful. They told me, like, why I wasn't able to do things, and they educated me, and one thing I loved about my parents were if they said no to me, they would also put me in the seat of, if your child were to ask you to do this at your age and their capacity right now, what would your answer be? And I loved that. Yeah, I loved it. It actually like allowed me, because also one of the things my parents were very strong on in terms of values was like no lying, right? Like let's create like an honest household. If you tell me the truth, like we're able to problem solve things versus you lying to us. And my parents always knew when we lied, so it just wasn't worth it. So every time like they asked me that, it allowed me to actually be a lot more mature and also hold on a lot of responsibility. I have three little beautiful children below me. I call them my kids, even though they're not. They're my siblings. And I feel like being the eldest daughter, you're kind of like a second mom. And my father was a successful businessman for a period of time until he lost his business. My mom was, the bookkeeper and helping him with the books. So it was a lot of me taking on, like three other young ones below me and making sure that, you know, uh, everyone is fed, and making sure that everyone's doing their homework. There was a lot of, me helping out within the household. And then eventually, like when I got into my teens, there was a lot of, me pushing that responsibility onto my siblings because I'm like, I've done it enough for a couple of years. Overall, like eventually after 8 years old, we made a couple of big transitions, and there was a lot of stress within the household. And, so both of my parents were working 50, 60 hours a week in the family business. And I was just, just very alone. And because there was a lot of stress, a lot of disconnection, from family time, and my parents were great, supporting all the fundamental needs and providing all the financial like providing all the, like the food, the shelter. Like I never had to
Yes.
worry about food on the table or a roof over my head. And I think that comes also to the gaslighting of yourself. Mommy and daddy are so stressed. If I'm just good, then, they're not going to fight. They're not going to, get mad at like the other siblings or anything like that. They're not going to get mad at me. So my house started to become a little bit more volatile the more that there was stress, like with the family dynamics. I had to pretend like I, was really good in school, or if my dad was trying to help me with math. I remember like this one instance where if I didn't get it right within like the first two times, like he would like blow up. He's like, I explained it to you once, I explained it to you twice. You should know this by now. And I was just like always, like anxious, right? So I stopped, like after that situation, I stopped asking my parents for help. I was very like the child where I was glorified for, she's so good, I don't have to worry about her. So I was very like just, I could not feel anything because I had to make everything okay outside of myself. Yeah, to like mitigate conflict, because if I didn't do it, then no one would. And I feel like the rest of my siblings, because I have two brothers and a sister, my siblings used to get really upset at me because I was the only girl who was small. Like I'm only like 5'4" and I'm almost 30. So like my father, like couldn't necessarily like hit me too much or like push me around too much. So I overcompensated with my voice of like, I'm not enabling this behavior. This is bad. Stop treating mom like this. Stop, like treating the boys like this, right? And there was just like a lot of like I cannot feel because I need to protect everyone outside of myself.
Mm.
And over time, like I just really, displaced my energy within relationships to make me feel safe because like I just didn't feel safe at home for a very long time.
Thank you so much for sharing about this and opening up because I think a lot of people listening can relate. Is it fair to say that you felt like you were experiencing what we call the parentified child, right? Where you are having to embody the parent, whether that meant parenting yourself or parenting your siblings. There wasn't room for you to really feel your emotions or to go and get support. From this very young age, you're kind of learning to shut down emotionally, disconnect from your own experience and just try to keep the peace and try to take care of everybody else around you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think within that mindset, you also gaslight yourself of, you know, is it this bad? You know, do I actually need my parents? Do I need their love? Do I need their support? Because their level of support and the capacity that they had at that current time wasn't really what I wanted. And I feel like I went into relationships where I repeated that cycle that I saw within my parents' dysfunctional relationship, but then I also used them as a blueprint of also what I didn't want.
Yeah. And you brought up a really good point too, just about how I think sometimes we're like, oh, I have a roof over my head. I have food on the table. My parents are taking care of me, and as a child, you have to maintain the relationship with your parents. It is necessary for your
Mhm,
survival for things like food and shelter, etc. So it's really easy to do just what you're saying, to gaslight yourself and kind of diminish what you're actually feeling emotionally. Because if you tried to acknowledge those emotions, you wouldn't know what to do with them. We don't have any healthy models
mhm,
of emotional expression. But then it also threatens the relationship, it threatens your survival if you were to say anything. So
mhm,
as children, right, we have to realize that you're forced to just completely ignore those things that are uncomfortable in the relationship. And I know you and I talked about this. It's that duality of which you've done a very good job of explaining. Your parents were doing the best that they could, and there are ways that they failed you. And both of those things are true. But acknowledging factors like the business ownership, the volatility in finances, the having four children, right? Like you're acknowledging all these factors and kind of you can see where it's coming from, but it's also we have to acknowledge this was hurtful to you. There's ways that this failed you. But both of those things are true.
yeah, and I find, being a coach and coaching a lot of people along the last 5 years of my career, I feel that's where healing begins, is forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about creating space internally within yourself to honor your truth and your experience. And it allows you to feel it in your body versus try to intellectualize our emotions as a defense mechanism.
Oh my gosh. I think you and I both were probably good at this at one point in our life of using that of like, I'm just gonna learn about everything. And if I understand it
Mhm.
on an intellectual level, then it makes it all go away. But yeah, in reality, we have to create that safety within ourselves to allow ourselves to feel, right? Yeah. And Isabel, I was thinking about this thing that we do where we go, oh, I didn't have it that bad. Look at what these other people experience. Like I actually remember in grade school, there was a kid that came to school that his parents couldn't afford shoes and he was like barefoot in class. And I remember thinking like, oh, my family life isn't that bad. Like, this kid doesn't have shoes. At least I have shoes on my feet. And I just think, and you and I both know this, you cannot invalidate your experience by saying, "Oh, I didn't have it that bad."
Mhm.
Emotional trauma is emotional trauma. We know this impacts us in so many ways. Your journey is no better, no worse than anyone else. It's different.
Mhm.
but it's so valid, and it sounds like how did you start to learn, like, what were some of the experiences that you were having where you're going, "Oh, I do have relational trauma. Oh, I do have emotional trauma." When did you start to realize that?
Ooh, I would say I would definitely say in high school, I knew. You don't know, you can't put a finger on it, especially coming from a European household. There's a lot of you can't speak outside of the house, right? Because there has to be loyalty to the family name. You have to uphold the family name. And there is a lot of there's just, like, a lot of, I guess, like, family kind of dynamics and rules that you have to follow, and they position it as a cultural thing. I feel like a lot of Europeans will understand what I'm talking about, but I do think that, going back to your question, it was a little bit in high school because I started, having, like, an eating disorder as a way to control something. I couldn't control externally what was going on in my life. I I got bullied significantly. Weight was talked about so much in my house, and there was like this worth component where it's like I already don't feel good enough. So what can I control in order for me to feel good enough? And at the time that was my food, that was working out. And for a period of time, it was wonderful. I was able to see results. It made me feel like finally, maybe this is what love is, until it turned into an overcompensation of control, of, I'm not good enough yet, am I? And then that gaslighting happens again. And then it, like impacts relationships at the time in high school, some other kind of, in hindsight moments where I felt, okay, there's something wrong in terms of, this emotional trauma was I was dating a guy from Australia for over 5 years. It was long distance. There would be over like 8 hours where we're on like a Zoom and I'm not saying anything because I just emotionally shut down. And it had nothing to do with him. It had more to do with family dynamics. And we've always had candid conversations of, I don't feel like I am good enough to reach whatever standard that you are looking for me, right? It's like I don't party, I don't do anything. Like I am what my culture is telling me is a good girl. I'm following all the things. And these were all things that I started to realize I'm not communicating. I can't communicate. When I do communicate, I just bottled up 2 years worth of stuff and I'm like, "I'm breaking up with you and this is all the reasons and I can't handle you, right? Anymore." And that obviously left him, like broken, which, I wish I did things differently a couple of times in our relationship for sure. But these were the things in hindsight from the beginning that started making me realize, okay, something isn't right. So my next relationship, I tried to fix that, but then I started over communicating to the point where it's like I didn't even give him space to love me the way that he wanted to love me. And then that also created, like him lying to me and him trying to, not create, that secure relationship and breaking a lot of trust.
Yeah, and as you're talking, obviously, I think about attachment styles and the way that communication is kind of a symptom of whatever your attachment style is. So in that long distance relationship with the avoidant attachment, more of that sort of passive, I'm going to bottle everything up. And then things come out sideways. They come out how we would never want them to come out. And they come out in ways that damage the relationship and make us feel terrible. And then it reinforces the belief that I can't communicate because look how terrible the communication was. So I think looking at that as, okay, yeah, of course, that was a symptom of your attachment style. And with avoidant attachment, I want people to get this, that when you aren't connected to yourself, you're not aware of your own emotional experience, your own emotional processing. How are you supposed to communicate it to someone else if you're not connected to yourself, right?
Mhm.
So it's like that lack of safety with yourself also creates a huge amount of lack of safety with somebody else.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I would say across the board, all my relationships have been very avoidant. My most dysfunctional relationship, it was only 6 months. All my other relationships were at least, like 2 years, or, my 5-year relationship at the time, where I did some healing. I chose myself. I thought I was going to marry my college boyfriend, but just based on all the trust that was broken, the lies, and just everything. And I could take accountability for me again being avoidant and like being, sometimes emotionally volatile in terms of, like instead of initiating a conversation with curiosity, I would, condemn, why are you doing all this stuff? Like I deserve, to be treated better. Why aren't you treating me better? And then it's like a whole mirror of my whole life, no one treating me the way that I wanted to be treated. Why? Because I'm not treating myself that way, right? And it took me a lot in hindsight to realize that. So when I ended that relationship, it was really hard for me because I'm like, I really thought I was going to marry that man until I was like, you know what? I'm not. That relationship was going to, and I also spoke this to him a couple of times where I said, I'm so scared about this relationship progressing because it reminds me of my parents, and I do not want to, relive that. That's a life that I've made very clear in my head at the time in college that I do not want, right? And so when I left that and I got into, I did some work for about like 8 months. I had to make sure that, that relationship was done. You always go back a little bit, try and fix things out, but I could tell like it was just 100% over between him and I. And I jumped into this new relationship and he was everything that my other partner was not. And it was so funny because you compare and you're just like, I really like, he has the fun side and he brings out this expansion in me. And it's, because of love bombing, right? I'm going to give you everything you've ever wanted within the first, like month until, we end up, dating. And then it's just like a switch and you're wondering why it switched. Like, why can't we get back to, the honeymoon stage? And it's so crazy. I remember the first date I went with him, it was amazing. It was like one of the best dates at the time that I thought that I've ever had in my life. And I just drove to his house. I was not dressed up. I just had my hair done, maybe some eyeliner, and I just said, "Okay, you know what? Like let's hang out for the night, and if it's, not a good time, then at least we know, right?" Cuz he was messaging me for like 3 weeks straight. I said he was coming on way too much. Like, I'm like, "You have to dial it back." And then I guess I didn't get attention one week and I was like, "Okay, let's entertain this." And I remember driving all the way back to my house because I lived an hour up north at the time. And I remember filling up my gas, and it was really late at night. It was like maybe like almost 2 o'clock in the morning. And the gas lady asked me, like, "Oh, you seem like very up and excited. Like, are you like, what happened? Right? How was your night?" And I said, "It was amazing. I went on the most exciting first date ever. It was wonderful. Like, this guy may be the one, right?" So now we're looking at anxious tendencies of like over fantasizing, and like living in that reality instead of physical reality, right? And I will never forget the word she told me. She said, "All that glitters isn't gold. Watch yourself." I have not seen her until we actually broke up a month later.
Wow, Isabella. I think anybody who has dated somebody who is either a narcissist or has narcissistic traits can so relate to what you just shared. I mean, I can be like, yep, I remember the first date with somebody who was love bombing me. And it's that, oh my gosh, this is what I've been waiting for, right? It's this person who's going above and beyond and just showering you with all of the things, whether it's material gifts or the emotional things that we feel like we've been missing. And it so easily pulls you in like quicksand. So 6 months of this, you're dating this person. A lot of times in this type of relationship, it's that intermittent reinforcement, the unpredictable high highs that we talk about, like a
Low
gambling
lows.
addiction, and then
Mhm.
the low lows. Is that what went on for you, or what happened during the course of the relationship?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. So much. I think I remember like, he's the most insignificant relationship now, which is beautiful. It shows you the healing journey.
Yes.
Um, but I would say there was extremely high highs, low lows. You know, the first 3 months, it was, like, the first month was amazing, right? The love bombing. The next 2 months was good. You're starting to, you're starting to introduce him to the friends, but there was something about him, I'm like, "I really don't wanna introduce you to my family." There's just something about him. There was this trip that we scheduled for, him meeting, I guess, like, my siblings and my cousin, and it was gonna be a week, like, long event, and he just started to pull out the, "Oh, I'm working last minute," and it was because his mother didn't want, me around, and he was just very, like, he would always withhold communication and then love bomb me, withhold communication and then be like, "Oh, you're the only girl I ever want to be with." And because it was also a long distance relationship, like in terms of like being an hour and a half away from one another, because I was in the north, he was closer to Toronto. And there was a lot of weaponization of my vulnerability, where I wanted to be close and connected to him like I once was back in, like month 1, month 2, but it was like he would just dismiss it and shut it down instead of create, a safe space for like, "Oh, I hear you, like, I won't do that anymore." I feel like in the beginning of the relationship when we felt comfortable to be intimate with one another, just kinda doing like a different layer of it, because I think an anxious avoidant polarized relationship, I think there's also, that physical element of, but I feel so connected to you physically, like, why is it, emotionally we're not connecting? Why do you pull away? Why is there why are we having like sex 4 times a day, like for 3 days straight? And then it's kind of like you're ghosting me for 4 days, right? And then it's like, oh, I've just
Yes.
been busy with work. Your actions are no longer lining up with your words. Whenever I would, just feel not safe chatting with him, he would gaslight me into being like, very soft and being like, oh, like, why do I feel like you're always walking on eggshells around me? And like, I just want you to be open and yourself so we can grow this relationship. But it was like my intuition screaming, like, you're not safe though. You're so like emotionally dysregulated. How can you regulate me? How can you look for this intimacy when you can't even regulate yourself? And I've never experienced anxious attachment style until this relationship, but I was mirroring him more so in a disorganized way. And I remember I was very avoidant until he pulled away because he felt like I was not invested into the relationship. And then everyone knows that light switch that goes off. And we had an argument over the phone, and he literally was like, I'll call you back. Didn't call me back. I think he blocked my number. So my intuition told me not to call his mom. Obviously, I called his mom to just be like, hey, like, like what's going on, this, that, and the other. She basically said no and never call this house again. And I was just like, abandonment, 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 right? So obviously, when that light switch flips off
Mhm.
from avoidant to anxious, you're instantly going to have a reaction. And my reaction was to take action, jump into my car, emotionally dysregulated, and drive an hour and a half to this man's house in the middle of the night before he went to work the next day. And I was so, so, so fragile. I was so fragile. I was shaking. I was literally having almost an emotional breakdown. And I remember being outside his house, and he was inside, his friend was over, and he wouldn't come out until his sister came home and she saw me, and I said, "Hey, like, do you mind, like, getting, like, your brother for me?" And she got him, he came out, and he was you could see, like, a little distraught, of like, "Oh, shit, like, I didn't know you were gonna be this fragile," like, and then he
Mhm.
consoled me, right? So it's like, this is all I wanted. I'm like, "What happened? Like, what was going through your mind? This, that, and the other." And we had, a little honest, like, chat, so you feel emotionally reconnected, right? And I was very supportive in, like, him hanging out with his friends, so he left for the whole weekend, and, again, like, no word after that. And before he actually left, a couple of days after this incident, he told me over the phone as we're just casually chatting, and he was saying to his best friend, like, "Hey, when I blocked you and, I told my best friend I knew you were gonna come down." And he said it with such a level of accomplishment of, like, knowing how to manipulate or kind of flip that switch in me that actually made me feel like I'm like, "That is a red flag." Like, I cataloged it in the back of my head of, like, that's when I started realizing, okay, like, this is dysfunctional. And at this time, my cousins and mainly my cousin was, putting bets on, when we were gonna break up at this point, because then there was a dysfunctional situation that happened, at that gathering of, like, the weekend away. We were fighting, we, like, literally were yeah, it was really bad. I was very irritable, I was very volatile to even my loved ones, which is not fair to them, right? And that's a whole other conversation of, the law of familiarity, right? Where it's easier to be rude or mean or have, like, aggressive flares to the people that we love closest to us versus strangers, right?
There's so much there that you shared. And I think, once again, anybody who's been in a toxic relationship or a relationship with someone, and I don't know if you identify this person as a narcissist. I mean, it sounds like it. We never know if it's narcissistic traits or they meet full criteria. It's all semantics. But, this type of relationship, my goodness, it causes you to go into that totally energy drained, fragile state
Mhm,
that you talked about, and just all of the self-abandoning, the walking on eggshells. And I think, once again, it's important to note this is coming from some of those roots of the childhood relational trauma. And there's that part of you that's like, hey, I can just be good enough. I can be the good girl. I can be whatever you need me to be, and I can get you to choose me. I can get us back to that state that we were at the beginning when I felt fully loved and I felt fully chosen. And there's these little breadcrumbs of, oh, we can get back to that place. And it's just so easy to get pulled in. And
mhm.
and I definitely relate. I think this is important. Well, there's like two things you said I want to go back to because the audience needs to hear this. Number one, that piece you said early on of we're more susceptible to this kind of relationship and trying to make it work when we don't have that secure love in our family life, because
Mhm.
we're looking for it. We we
Yeah.
want we want secure love. So we're more susceptible to, I'll do whatever I have to do to try to make it work in this relationship.
And we're outsourcing our worth, to be completely
Yes.
honest, right? If
Yes.
we don't know how to love ourselves because we were taught these are the parameters and this is the box in order for a man to love you, to be an eligible bachelor, you need to be the good girl, you need to have XYZ characteristics, right? You have to look a certain way, you have to have more of a submissive personality. And it's like I did everything right. And this relationship showed me that, okay, but what, like, I haven't changed. I'm still, like, in this box. Why have you changed? And then it forces you of, okay, the template is not working. So now I'm gonna know your preferences, and now I'm gonna change my identity to be the best person and partner for you. And when we look at this in a secure way, that is okay, right? You have those intimate, honest communication of, who you are as a person and the other person who they are. And then you co create and add and expand together. That is beautiful. But when we look at the polarization within a dysfunctional relationship, that is very dangerous because you're removing and you're subtracting everything that makes you you in order to be this perfect person for this one person. And it completely disempowers you.
Yeah. The self-abandonment, right? The self-abandonment that happens, and thinking about that, the anxious avoidant dynamic with disorganized attachment. And I think likely you're talking about two people with disorganized attachment here. So then when one person's anxious, the other person's avoidant, and vice versa, right? It's this really painful toxic dance that you go through. People often label this as trauma bonding. Um, I think that type of dynamic, you talked about this. The emotional intensity can feel like a drug. You can feel
Mhm,
like, oh, I'm addicted to this relationship and I want to quit it and I don't know how. And you mentioned the physical chemistry, you mentioned the sex being amazing. And I think people need to realize that when you are in this type of dynamic, reassurance is not available.
mhm,
There is not secure attachment readily available where you're going, oh, this is my person, everything's good, we're choosing each other, everything's healthy. But during sex, you get those endorphins, you get the oxytocin, you get the feeling of, "Oh, I'm being given reassurance that this is my person." So there's this emotional intensity that is associated with physical intimacy and that type of dynamic that is different from a secure relationship because secure relationship we have a constant stream of reassurance and we have the secure foundation. So it's a whole different type of intimacy that you experience in a secure relationship. And I think knowing that you have safety in the secure sex and that you don't have safety in
mhm.
an anxious avoidant dynamic, realizing that secure connected sex is sustainable, gets better with time. It allows for all kinds of, um, experimenting with each other, communicating about what you like, what you don't like, etc. Like building a fulfilling sex life together versus this thing that is intense and causes your emotions to go haywire and just really isn't sustainable. Plus, can be removed at any point in time because it can be used to manipulate and cause you to, once again, question the reassurance and question the connection. I just felt like you mentioning this was so important for the audience of like, let's clear this up once and for all because I'm sure you hear this all the time where somebody goes, "Oh, but the sex is so great." It's like, you know what? That's probably the result of a really unhealthy attachment dynamic. Like, I hate to break it to you, but that's
Yeah.
probably what it's connected to. And you can have great sex in a secure relationship. You just build it differently and it looks differently.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I feel like a lot of the people that I've coached, they feel like the sex is great from my personal experience, and then also based on the amount of people that I've coached, because it kinda mimics the desires or what we think that we want based on porn and, like, what others, like, consume. So, it is completely different than secure attachment sex because it's all about what do you actually want, right? Like, what do you want? And, like, I'm not, shaming porn or anything like that, and, that's a whole other conversation, but it's completely different. It's you feel a little used like an object, and because
Yeah,
in that relationship and that polarization, you feel like you're not good enough. And because you don't feel good enough, it feels so good in that dynamic when you are physically
to be
intimate because you're
chosen.
like, "Wow, you're choosing me." It seems very performative. I feel like an object. A lot of people also talk about the frequency, right? So there is again an overcompensation of physical intimacy, but the emotional intimacy isn't there. And that's, where the highs are. And then you want more of those highs emotionally, but there isn't a capacity for that depending on, the partner that you're with, especially in this dynamic. And I would say the breaking point for me was when I started to feel empty. And not
Yep.
only just after physical intimacy, but also just sleeping in the same bed. And I feel like a lot of people listening could resonate with this. And you literally feel not only drained and not safe, but empty. this bed used to feel, whether there was physical intimacy or not, this bed used to feel full. It used to feel alive. It used to have those high moments and sometimes those, sustaining moments. But now it feels so empty, and it's feeling empty a lot more often than you like. And you start to get a little discomfort from that. And then eventually you start noticing it's not going to change. And that's where I started. That was like one of my cues that led me to breaking up with him, because now the intimacy was great in the beginning, like cool, like yes, it's a little performative, it's explorative, it's adventurous, it has the highs, it has, this level of acceptance of like exploration, and it's always taken away. And now you start feeling like an object because there is no communication around, okay, what do I like? What do you like? And let's continue that. No, it's just, again, like time after time, you're starting to realize, oh, it's very performative. Oh, like, are we going to have like this, you know, glamorized performative, intimacy like for the rest of our
Yeah.
lives? Like, where is this security coming from? And I feel like a lot of people, just me sharing that, I hope that allows you to have just a little bit of a cue within your own personal relationships to allow you to take back your power and, create more secure, intimate moments together.
No, I think this is so important. Just that feeling that you get in a dysfunctional connection where it's like, oh, I could be anybody, right? I'm just an object. I'm just a placeholder. It starts to feel that way when it's not a secure connection. And I really appreciate you sharing this. I mean, I've shared about my own sort of rock bottom moments that led me to healing, but I think people need to hear these stories and just know that they're not alone. And I appreciate that you talked about just that emptiness that you get to where you're just going, wow, I'm with this person, but I feel so alone, or I do not feel like myself. I'm so far away from the person that I once was, and kind of that place where you go, I cannot keep showing up like this.